Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Miles, and I'm back with the one and only Ian Erskine in this episode of X Raced, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. Now, you know those conversations where people keep talking about systems, technology, compliance, automation, AI, all those big buzzwords. Well, Ian is here to remind us of something refreshingly simple and something many organizations still forget. Businesses don't improve by magic. They improve through people. And not just people filling seats or ticking training boxes, but people with real competence, capability, strategic thinking, and genuine engagement. This is going to be about competence management, people development, total quality management or TQM, continuous professional development, and why future ready leadership starts with investing in human capability, not just technology. He's a strong advocate for accelerating continuous improvement and a passionate voice behind ISO standards focused on people, competence, and organizational growth. So, I won't let you wait any longer. Here's the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and e-Quip. Hi, Ian. Welcome back to our podcast.
And welcome back as well, Miles, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And welcome to all our lovely guests out there. And again, I trust you all had a wonderful weekend with your families and loved ones. And yes, so it's been a beautiful weekend here, weather-wise. And yes, so this is a very, very interesting topic, one very dear to my heart. And again, I'll be able to re-emphasize within this podcast a couple of real little things that have happened along the way, which and it's interesting, some always stay in your mind, and a couple of little instances I can re-emphasize in reference to when we're talking about competence and capability.
And I'm sure a lot of organizations proudly talk about quality systems and technology upgrades, but not enough people stop and ask whether the people inside the organization are actually growing as well. So, to kick things off, Ian, when people talk about the quality of an organization, the discussion usually goes straight to systems or compliance or technology. But how much of sustained success really comes down to the competence and capability of people? And why do you think so many of them still underestimate that connection?
Well, I think because there's not enough time in the initial planning done. And quite often I see this within organisations where I'll sit down with people and I'll talk about them in their own space. And quite often, um, a lot of the times, the senior manager or the managing director will come round when I walk around the office or the factory and talk to individuals. And one of the most important things that generally comes out, and the ones that have really got this nailed, are the ones that have that very good personal relationship with their people.
Mhm.
And this is where we talk about personal competencies, because each person is different. Each person brings a different characteristic and a different flavour, enthusiasm to that role. And this is what you really need to delve into when you develop your competency program for your company,
Mhm.
and it involves all your people. And this is where you need to step back, sit down with the person within their role, and just ensure that not only are they comfortable, but they need to be made really become really switched on so that they can be challenged to bring out the best in that role. Now,
Mhm.
to bring out the best in that role, they've got to be challenged themselves to bring out the best in themselves. And that's where we talk about um, performance criteria and key evidence guides, and getting those right for each of the tasks within that role is very, very critical. And again, it's very important to make sure that the competencies and the capability are very much tied in with, as I said, not only their own aspirations and their goals in life, but it's got to obviously tie into the organisation's policy and strategic direction. And that way, what you do, you end up with a process that you're continually improving and you're maintaining that competence and improving that competence at all times. And in some respects, that also then comes back to the ability when you sit down and you're doing your appraisals. There needs to be this challenge between you both, the employee and the person who's doing the appraisal, to challenge. You're
Yeah.
doing a great job, but do you
Mhm.
think you can do better? And even what
Mhm.
I like to see from the person that's actually doing the appraisal is that throw in line, where do you think your next challenge is going to be? Are you willing to step up into the next role, the junior manager or the senior manager's role?
Mhm.
And because I'm quite sure, I'm quite confident that you have the competence and the capability, and we're working on that all the time together to ensure that that happens. So that challenge, that aspiration, the tying into the strategic goals of the organisation is a key part of competence and competence management.
Mhm. Yeah, you know what, Ian? It reminds me of what my dad would remind me when he was still alive, that we get polished, he meant better, through surpassing challenges in life. And that applies to work as well. I think that's such a great point because a lot of businesses invest heavily in systems, in tools, but sometimes forget the people actually using them every day. And you can usually tell pretty quickly when an organization has invested in people development versus when they've only invested in paperwork. And speaking of development, one thing I find interesting in ISO 10015 is how competence management is treated as an ongoing process. So, building on that, what separates organizations that genuinely develop capable people from those that simply tick the training box for compliance purposes?
Well, this is becoming ever increasing uh, exciting for me because what I see going through and doing my organisations, and I'll be doing another small family oriented business over this coming week, and they're in the asbestos business where they remove asbestos and they have to take it out very carefully, and it's stored in a separate area and disposed of correctly. But there's this sense at all times that, and I take it back to families. I want organisations to treat their people as part of their family, part of their business, part of their bigger stretch of their family, so to speak. And this ability to always ensure that people are an essential part of an organisation. They cannot be replaced. Without people, you really don't have a business,
Yeah.
and things like that. So again, this is where we look to ensure that each of the tasks within the role are measured accordingly. And as I said before, this is where we talk about performance criteria and evidence guides. And it's quite interesting because as we go year in, year out, and we move forward within our lives and within the maturity of the business, quite often those performance criteria and evidence guides of each of the tasks of the person's role change. And again, this is where it's so important for the performance appraisals to pick this up early so that people are prepared. And this is where you, again, part of the challenge, you have to challenge everyone within your organisation. Okay, so what additional learning and professional development are you doing? And that needs to be encouraged. Now, quite a significant amount of that can be done in-house, right? But there are, and this is where I employ organisations to ensure that that external learning is done. So it could be working within industry groups and things like that. Because I go back through my career, and a lot of the personal development and enhancement I gained was from working on a number of ISO committees and things like that, where we sat down in a group somewhere between 5 and 10 people, and we discussed what was coming through and things like that. Even little issues where we were having a trouble here in Australia with imported gas cylinders, and they were being imported from a country that didn't have a lot of quality control,
Mm-hmm.
and we were starting to see explosions of people's barbecue cylinders and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the research that a number of us did was that we researched a number of these incidents, and what it basically boiled down to, when the cylinder was being manufactured and the final welds were being put in place, there wasn't any follow-up to check to see whether those welds were sufficient and
Mm-hmm.
right up to TQM. And again, this is where you get the ability and you challenge everyone. Yes, try and become involved in your technical committees within your industry base, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
this allows you to be always ahead of new technologies, right? And things like that. So this is what I'm saying. This is a very important part, and it's going back to the personal competencies and tying it in, and always reviewing those competencies and obviously capabilities, yes, and through performance criteria and evidence guides.
Yes. And I really like that distinction because people can immediately feel the difference between a workplace that develops them and one that simply hands them a checklist. And from a business perspective, competence management really does become part of this long term performance, culture, and even retention. And this next area makes me curious because everywhere we look today, Ian, the conversation is dominated by AI, automation, and digital transformation. But you've raised a very different perspective through human intelligence mining, or HIM, which really shifts the focus back to people and cognitive thinking. So, my question is, in this world with a lot of people getting obsessed with AI and automation, which is I wouldn't say good. Do you think businesses are in danger of forgetting the value of cognitive thinking, strategic thinking, and real human capability?
Well, this is the key issue today, and again, it came up very much so in the last audit I did last week, where it was a company that actually is involved in data and the protection of data, the protection of human data, and everything like that. And we talked about AI, and this is a company. Yes, they are using AI, and it is improving some of their processes within the data flow.
Mm-hmm.
But we got back, and again, what I like now to do, I challenge people. I say, well, okay, you talk about AI. Okay, tell me what does artificial actually mean? And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because that's where they can't answer it. They start to talk about data and how it improves the flow and improves your tasks and your jobs and things like that. And I say, no, hold on, just just stay back on what is actually artificial. And there and there, you then tap in and you okay, you talk about what is actually happening here. And it is. It's humanity being attacked. And this is now where I'm trying to now get people back to talking about humanity,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of ourselves within the world sphere, our social fabric, and everything like that. That is all tied to people, right? Now, as I said, there's no such thing as AI. It's human intelligence mining. So what it basically is, it's taking your information, takes it away, puts it out in like a big melting pot, which is all the data centers, right? And then brings it back and gives it back to you and say, hey, that's the solution to your problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I'm now saying to people, well, that's fine, but bear in mind what you've put in has now been all mixed up with a whole heap of others' professional data and human intelligence and travelled back to you, so-called improved, right? Now,
Uh-huh.
it's an interesting thing now. What we're now concentrating on is the dangers of this in reference to, well, hang on, if you look at that and you're overawed, wow, that looks fantastic. Okay, I'll accept that, put it into place, and away it goes. No, it is so important. You have to maintain what originally put in the information
Mm-hmm.
so that you can have a look, refer back. Because what I say to people, I say, well, number one, let's have a look at what you've been getting back, right? And some people show me, right? And I say, well, that's interesting. Why are all these little rectangles within each of the paragraphs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have you proofread that? Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. I said, well, okay, so what's that little rectangle there, right? Next sentence down, or a couple of sentences, is another rectangle, right? And I say, that is because AI, HIM, right, can't think, and it doesn't know to put a comma in. It can't put a comma in, so it puts a rectangle.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And that's the telltale sign where a person or people haven't reviewed the documentation coming back, right? But again, as I said, I'm now taking this right back to humanity, ourselves, in our own lives, in our own social fabric, within our own families. And again, just simple little things when we pack up the car and we hop in the car and we go to mass, right? We sit in church and we listen to the proceedings, we listen to the priest give his homily and things like that. And quite often, this is where, I'll look as people are listening to the homily, and quite often I'll say at the end of the church service, I'll go and stand by the priest and I say, that was absolutely a magnificent homily, because what you've done, you've taken the Christian reading and you've put it into real life meaning,
Mm-hmm.
and you can actually see. And I was actually sitting next to a family on the weekend. Loretta wasn't there because she was away. And I was listening to the homily, and two young boys, right? And you could see they had actually heard, and it resonated on these two young boys what the priest had actually said.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, there's another example of humanity. This is how we all evolve within our own careers, within our own families. And again, this goes back to capability, cognitive thinking, because we're all taking on these different ideas. And that's where I often challenge people. What did you learn over the last week that you've now brought to work
Uh-huh.
that you can put to into play? And this is where it's so important that we challenge people. It's not artificial at all. This is
Mm-hmm.
human intelligence mining, and it has serious ramifications if we don't heed this, right? And there's enough warnings out there, and we have to bring it back to personalities, personal profiles, and that way you're going to have an organization that forms part of your family
Mm-hmm.
and your broader family, and one that is going to really nail sustained success.
Yeah, and I agree with your refreshing perspective, Ian. Technology is advancing incredibly fast, but critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and leadership and decision making still come from people, us. And I think many leaders listening today will probably relate and agree as well to having that balance between embracing innovation while still keeping a strong people focus. And before I forget, Ian, I would love for you to share that story about your friend that you mentioned earlier before we started recording, especially the part about thinking through the long term ramifications of the work or projects you choose to pursue. I think that insight would really resonate with the audience.
Yes, well, this was a situation, and there's one that deeply affected me during my life, and it was a situation where um, our family was put at risk, and both my brother and I were put in a position where our personal freedoms were being threatened. And anyway, it was a situation where um, I'd come into Griffith, and we were actually evicted from our flat because it had been broken in not long after a very close friend of mine had been murdered. And anyway, so my brother and I turned up with my in my car, and anyway, we drove up beside the flat, and Red said to me, he said, "Oh my God, your door's open, it's been broken into.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, as quick as a flash, out of the car I got and grabbed well, I will say, grabbed my shotgun and went just straight into the flat.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, how dare they do this and so forth. And the adrenaline and everything was pumping. And anyway, I think back on that quite often, and this is where I challenge people to make sure that they do their planning correct, right, in whatever they do. They have to think of the ramifications. And
Yeah.
again, this comes back to automation, right?
Mhm.
And I'm probably jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but it comes back to you have to be prepared to think through what you're doing, right? And I always take people back to the little book, Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's such a wonderful, powerful perspective, Ian. And that naturally brings us into people engagement and total quality management because even the best systems in the world can fail if people don't feel connected to the bigger mission. So, how can organizations create a culture where people actually feel emotionally invested in continuous improvement and future ready leadership?
Well, as I just introduced it, this is where you really need to drill down and nail the plan, do, check, act process. Plan, do, check, and act. And in the planning part of that, um, I always refer people back to the little book Who Moved My Cheese, and that's one of the standard things that I introduce during the audit process is when we talk about assessing the issues, right? Because that's what you have to do. You have to assess the issues before they become a hazard or an environmental aspect or a hazard incident within a milk factory or something like that,
Mhm.
right? And I always introduce the little book, Who Moved My Cheese? And I've got a little image of two mice sitting there with a chunk of cheese to
Uh-huh.
remind myself of that very fact. And yes, because it puts it all into perspective. And I challenge people to get the book. You can read it online. It only takes you something like 15, 20 minutes to read.
Mhm.
But it just puts that funny side, that real side into planning, why you need to do planning.
Mhm.
And again, going back to human intelligent mining, I challenge people to plan. Don't just jump in and just accept, oh, well, we'll throw it out to AI and get AI. It's not AI, it's human intelligence mining. We'll throw our intelligence out there, we'll mix it up into a big database and send it back to us, and away we go. No, just challenge yourself. See if you can do it yourself, right? And that's what I'm now challenging people to use your personal competencies, right? And some people are better than others, but others always, the ones that have that slight weakness in thinking things through, the object of improving is when you're doing your personal appraisals and things like that to ensure that you do work through these issues so that you can have them sorted out.
Uh-huh. Right. So move my cheese.
Yes, who moved my cheese?
Yeah, and it's really worth taking note of that, Ian, because people engagement is something every organization talks about, but very few truly achieve consistently. And I think when people feel valued, developed, and connected to purpose, performance naturally improves alongside it. I mean, I've experienced it. So, for leaders tuning in today, Ian, particularly those wanting to improve organizational quality, strengthen competence management, or prepare for ISO certification, what you're about to say is probably the practical takeaway they'll want to hear most. So, where should they begin when it comes to competence management, continuous professional development, and building a people focused culture that can sustain long term success?
A very simple understanding of this, you need to understand what all this is about. So you have to understand quality. You
Mhm.
have to understand TQM, total quality management, right, which involves all aspects of life.
Uh-huh.
It involves you getting it right to start with, right? Involves your health and wellness, right?
Uh-huh.
Involves your part of society, being within an environment, right? And it also involves, very much so, again, food safety. So when you're preparing your meals and things like that, you must always concentrate on TQM. And one of the key ones, which I do want to re-emphasise in reference to TQM and food safety, is hygiene. One of the biggest issues we have in the world today is hygiene, which is causing lots of deaths, causing lots of people to become ill simply because, and it can a lot of times be boiled down to the fact people don't wash their hands properly and things like that when they're preparing food. But what we're talking about here is people being aware within their surroundings, being aware of the importance of do it once, do it right, being aware of they need to be continually always striving to do better so that they have that aspiration at all times to be able to step up the next rung of the ladder, the career ladder, for themselves. And this is where awareness really starts. And this is where we talk about the 10018 standard. And it's awareness of an understanding of TQM, right? Understanding of your workplace, understanding of where you are at any given time within society. And so, yes, this is a very, very important. And again, it boils back down to people's personal personality. This is where we talk about people's strengths, okay? And being aware, you need to be aware of what your strengths are. You need to be aware of what your weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge I throw out there for people is work on your weaknesses. Your strengths will automatically keep being strengthened, right? Because that's what comes naturally, right? What comes naturally, what your brain will always pick up is what you do well. Okay. It won't pick up when you're being sad and things like that because that makes your brain work even harder, right? Because it's hard to be sad. It's easy to smile, right?
Yes.
But again, this is where we have to really be aware of our own personal competencies
Mm-hmm.
and disciplines, right? Our ability, our strengths and weaknesses, and that's where you become aware within your own workplace, within your own families, so forth, and you work on those strengths and weaknesses to make sure that your weaknesses are the ones that are being worked on.
Uh-huh. Well, what a great and clear way to wrap this up, Ian. One thing I've really taken away from this conversation is that quality management is really about people, about their competence, capability, their engagement, their willingness to grow through challenges, which is a really great reminder for all of us. So, thank you so much again, Ian, for sharing your very practical perspective on competence management, people development, future ready leadership, and building organizations that are genuinely driven by capable people. Thank you. Always a pleasure having you here, Ian.
Yes, absolute pleasure. And look, for everyone, enjoy the week. And just remember, life is very, very precious. And again, work on those weaknesses and together. Don't just do it by yourself within the workplace. Work with your senior management and your colleagues. And that's the way that you keep building your personal competencies, ensuring that you're capable and ensuring that you're achieving your aspirations in life.
Mhm. Precious indeed. Thank you for that reminder, Ian. So, whether you're leading teams, running businesses, or simply trying to improve professionally, if you'd like to learn more about ACI Global and how they help organizations achieve compliance through conformance, make sure you connect with Ian and the team through the link below and keep your eyes open for this episode as well on the ACI Global website so you can easily stream and revisit the conversation anytime. Until our next one, this has been your host, Miles, with Ian, reminding you to stay focused, driven, and inspired with X Raced.